At my dad's birthday dinner, my brother shoved my son's chair away and said, "We need that seat for my kids." My mom snapped, "Stop acting like family matters to you." I didn't argue. I stood up and texted one line. "Go ahead. Start it." 20 minutes later. One text message. That's all it took to dismantle everything my brother spent years pretending he built. I'm not the kind of guy who does things for attention. Never have been. I don't post my wins online. I don't brag at dinner tables. And I sure as hell don't need anyone clapping for me when I walk into a room. My name is Marcus, and if you met me on the street, you'd probably think I was just some regular guy. Clean shoes, calm face, maybe a little too quiet for your taste. But behind that quiet is a machine. A real estate investment firm that I built from the ground up. No family money. No connections. No golden handshake from a rich uncle. Just years of 18-hour days, cold calls, bad deals that taught me good lessons, and a stubbornness that most people mistake for patience. I started with nothing. Literally nothing. I was 23 years old, working 2 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, and studying for my real estate license in between shifts. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a roadmap. I had a library card and a refusal to stay where I was. My first deal was a foreclosure property on the east side of town that nobody wanted. I bought it for almost nothing, fixed it up with my own hands, and sold it for 3 times what I put in. That one deal became 2. 2 became 10. 10 became a company. And that company became the thing that holds my entire family together, whether they know it or not. Today, I manage a portfolio worth more than most people will see in 3 lifetimes. And I say that not to impress you, but so you understand what happened next. Because when a man like me decides he's done, it's not a tantrum. It's a verdict. Let me tell you about my family. My father, Frank, is 71 years old. Retired. Bad heart. Worse knees, and a stubbornness that I clearly inherited. He worked at a manufacturing plant for 35 years, and when he retired, he thought his pension and savings would carry him through. They didn't. Medical bills stacked up. Property taxes went up. The pension barely covered groceries. But Frank is proud. He'll sit at a table with an empty plate and tell you he's already eaten. My mother, Diane, is the sharp one. She sees everything, says very little, but when she opens her mouth, walls crack. She's the kind of woman who can silence a room with a look. I got my strategy from her. She reads people the way I read contracts, carefully and without mercy. Then there's my older brother, Vincent, 2 years older than me. Runs a small contracting company. And by runs, I mean he shows up, shouts at a few guys, takes long lunches, and calls himself a business owner. Every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday, Vincent talks about his grind, his hustle, his empire. He uses words like scaling and revenue streams and pipeline, like he read them off the back of a cereal box. He tells people he's an entrepreneur. He puts it in his Instagram bio. He once told a waitress at a restaurant that he was in acquisitions. The man renovates bathrooms. Here's what Vincent doesn't know. His company's 3 biggest contracts? They come from me. Routed through a third-party firm I set up specifically so he'd never trace it back. I've been feeding his business for 4 years. Not because I feel sorry for him. Not because I need to. Because he's my brother, and the idea of him failing used to bother me more than the idea of him never knowing the truth. I thought I was being noble. Turns out I was just being patient. That math changed recently. See, I also pay my father's mortgage. Have been for 3 years, ever since his pension stopped covering it and the bank started sending letters with red stamps on them. I pay his medical bills too. Every cardiologist visit, every prescription, every scan, every time that man walks into a hospital and walks out with a bill that would make your eyes water, it's my name on the check. I set it up quietly, through my accountant. Frank doesn't even know the full picture. He thinks insurance covers most of it. It doesn't. I cover most of it. And I never once mentioned it at a dinner table because I didn't do it for the applause. I did it because he's my father, and that's what you do when you have the ability to help someone you love. And Vincent? Vincent takes credit for all of it. Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner, Vincent is the one who stands up and says things like, "I made sure Dad's appointment got moved up," or "I handled the pharmacy situation," or "I called the insurance people and sorted it out." He says it loud enough for the whole room to hear. He does that thing where he waves his hand like it was nothing, like he's being humble, but really he's making sure everyone notices. The family nods. Dad smiles at him. Diane sometimes raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. And me? I sit there eating my mashed potatoes, watching my brother perform the role of devoted son like he's auditioning for a Lifetime movie. I don't correct him, not because I'm afraid to, but because correcting Vincent would mean I care about Vincent's opinion. I don't. I stopped caring about his opinion a long time ago. The day I realized he'd rather look important than actually be important, I stopped competing with a man who was only racing against himself. That's the thing about Vincent. He's not evil. He's just empty. And empty people make a lot of noise because silence terrifies them. My wife, Shelby, hates it. She's told me 100 times. Every holiday we drive home from Frank's house, and she turns to me in the car and says, "Marcus, why do you let him do that? Why don't you just say something? One time, just one time, show them the receipts." And every time, I tell her the same thing. Because it doesn't change my life. And it didn't. For a long time, it really didn't. I had my firm, my family, my routine. Vincent could play king of the castle all he wanted. It didn't touch me. But there was a pattern, and patterns are something I pay attention to. At every family gathering, Vincent would find a way to make himself the center and make me the background. He'd talk over me when I spoke. He'd make little jabs disguised as jokes. Must be nice sitting behind a desk all day while the rest of us actually work with our hands. He'd say it with a grin, and someone would laugh, and I'd just nod because the amount of energy it takes to educate a man who doesn't want to learn is energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. Dad would laugh at Vincent's jokes. Spend time with Vincent on weekends. Watch games with Vincent. Not because he rejected me, but because Vincent was always there, always loud, always performing. And I was always working, always building, always quiet. Frank confused presence with loyalty. A lot of fathers do. I noticed Vincent's little games. The way he'd subtly undercut me in conversations. The way he'd change the subject whenever someone asked about my work. The way he'd invite the whole family to things and forget to tell me until the last minute. I noticed all of it, and I filed it away. Because that's what I do. I don't react. I observe. And I wait. Not for revenge. Just for clarity. For the moment when the picture becomes clear enough to act on. Until he touched my son. My boy Caleb. 7 years old. Quiet like me. Smart like his mother. The kind of kid who sits at a table and doesn't fidget, doesn't whine, doesn't throw things. He just watches. Takes everything in. He's got these big brown eyes that make you feel like he's reading your whole biography just by looking at you. He doesn't say much, but when he does, it's usually something that makes you stop and think. Last week he asked me, "Dad, why do big people talk so loud when they're wrong?" I didn't have an answer for that one. I just laughed and told him he'd make a great lawyer someday. I love that kid more than I love air. And the one rule I've always had, the one line I've never let anyone cross, is this: you do not disrespect my son. You can ignore me. You can take credit for my work. You can pretend I don't exist at your little dinner table. Fine. But the second you make my son feel small, you've started a war you cannot win. And I don't say that as a threat. I say it as geography. It's just the landscape of who I am. Dad's 71st birthday. A Saturday in October. The air was cool, the leaves were turning, and Diane organized a dinner at the house. The house I pay for. She didn't really organize it. She told Vincent to handle it. And Vincent told his wife Natalie to figure it out. And Natalie ordered a cake from a bakery and booked a caterer using a card that Frank gave her. That card? Connected to an account I fund. So in a roundabout way, I paid for the whole celebration. The cake that said "Happy Birthday, Frank" in blue icing. The catered trays of pasta and chicken. The table setup. All of it traced back to me. Nobody knew. Nobody needed to know. That's not why I do things. I showed up with Caleb around 6. Handed Dad a watch I'd had engraved on the back. To Frank. Time well spent. Love, Marcus. He looked at it, nodded, said nice. Then put the box on the counter next to the paper plates. Vincent hadn't arrived yet, but his gift, a bottle of whiskey and a card, was already on the table with a big tag that read, "From your number 1 son." I looked at it. Looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at me. I winked at him and said, "Let's go eat, buddy." Shelby couldn't make it. She had a work event that she couldn't reschedule. So it was just me and Caleb. He sat next to me at the table, eating his bread roll, kicking his feet under the table, occasionally looking around the room with those big eyes. He was happy, content, just being a kid at his grandfather's birthday dinner. No agenda, no performance, just existing. Then Vincent walked in. Late, of course, because Vincent always arrives late. It's his power move, his way of saying, nothing starts until I'm here. He walked in with Natalie and their two kids, Jackson and Lily. Jackson is 9, loud, already learning how to interrupt people from watching his father. Lily is 5, louder. They came in like a hurricane, bags and jackets everywhere, voices bouncing off the walls, and suddenly the whole energy shifted. Diane got up to hug them. Frank's face lit up like someone plugged him in. And Vincent, without missing a beat, without even saying hello to me, scanned the room, spotted the table, and walked straight toward us. Caleb was sitting in a chair at the corner of the table, not in anyone's way, not bothering a single soul, eating quietly. Vincent walked over, grabbed the back of Caleb's chair, and shoved it sideways. Hard. Not a nudge. A shove. Caleb's plate slid across the table, his water glass tipped and spilled across the tablecloth, and my 7-year-old son nearly fell off the seat. His elbow hit the table edge on the way down. "We need that seat for my kids," Vincent said. Casual. Like he was moving a piece of furniture. Like my son was an obstacle between him and what he wanted. I caught Caleb before he hit the floor. Pulled him close. Looked at his face. He wasn't crying, but his eyes were wide, confused, a little hurt. Not from the fall. From the feeling. That feeling when someone treats you like you don't matter. Like your presence is an inconvenience. Like you're in the way of someone more important. I know that feeling. I grew up in the shadow of that feeling. And I promised myself, on the day Caleb was born, that he would never have to sit in that shadow. The table went dead silent. Diane stood up slowly. Her face was tight, jaw locked, eyes burning. She looked at Vincent and said, clear as a church bell on Sunday morning, "Stop acting like family matters to you." The whole room froze. Even Jackson stopped talking. Natalie looked at the floor. Frank stared at his plate like he was trying to read his fortune in the mashed potatoes. Vincent blinked, then laughed. That nervous, performative laugh he does when he's been caught off guard. "Relax, Mom. It's just a chair. Just a chair." That's what he said. Just a chair. As if the chair was the point. As if this was about furniture and not about the fact that my son, my 7-year-old son, was treated like he was less important than a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old because of whose father they belonged to. Frank said nothing. He stared at his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the room. Classic Frank. The human disappearing act. When things get uncomfortable, Frank doesn't leave the room. He leaves reality. Just checks out. Folds himself into silence and waits for someone else to deal with the mess. That's the man who raised me. That's the man whose mortgage I pay. That's the man whose life I quietly sustain while he watches his other son shove my kid's chair and says nothing. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I didn't stand up and make a speech. I looked at Caleb, straightened his shirt, wiped the water off his sleeve, and said quietly, "You're okay, buddy. You're with me." Then I pulled out my phone. Typed one line to my assistant, "Derek. Go ahead. Start it." Press send. Put the phone back in my pocket. And sat there. Calm. Almost relaxed. Like a man who just pressed a button and knows exactly what's about to happen. Now let me explain what that text meant. Because it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't reactive. That text was the trigger for a plan I'd been building for 5 months. See, about 5 months before that dinner, my accountant flagged something strange. An irregularity in one of the shell company accounts I used to route contracts to Vincent's business. At first I thought it was a clerical error, but when I dug deeper, the picture got ugly fast. Turns out, Vincent had been inflating his revenue numbers to a commercial lender to qualify for a larger line of credit. He was reporting the contracts I was secretly sending him as organic revenue. As business he generated himself. But it didn't stop there. On top of the real numbers, he was padding additional figures. Fabricating invoices for projects that didn't exist. Overstating values on jobs he barely finished. He was telling a bank his company was doing twice the revenue it actually was, and using that lie to borrow money he had no way of paying back. Classic fraud. The kind that doesn't just end a business. It ends a career. Sometimes it ends freedom. I didn't confront him. Confrontation is what emotional people do. Strategic people document. So I had my legal team pull everything. Every fabricated invoice. Every inflated report. Every email where Vincent discussed the loan terms with his business partner. Every bank statement that didn't match reality. I had it all compiled, organized, time-stamped, and wrapped up in a neat little folder. and I sat on it. I told my legal team, my accountant, and Derek, we move when I say we move. Not a second before. And tonight, sitting at a dinner table in a house I pay for, watching my brother shove my son's chair aside like he was clearing trash, I said move. That one text set off a chain of events that had been loaded like a spring for 5 months. Within 20 minutes, 3 things happened simultaneously. First, my legal team sent a formal termination notice to the shell company I'd created, cutting off every single contract that had been flowing to Vincent's business. Effective immediately. No transition period. No courtesy call. No, let's discuss this. Just done. 4 years of support, gone in one click. Second, my accountant canceled the next scheduled mortgage payment on Frank's house. The one I'd been paying quietly and faithfully for 3 years. Stopped. The bank would notice within 30 days. Third, a certified letter was drafted and queued for delivery to the lending institution that Vincent had defrauded. Attached to that letter was every piece of documentation my legal team had gathered. Every fake invoice. Every inflated number. Every lie on paper. 20 minutes. That's all it took. 20 minutes of me sitting calmly at a table while 3 separate actions dismantled the life my brother had built on my back. Vincent's phone started buzzing about 15 minutes in. I didn't look at him. Didn't need to. I could feel it. The energy at the table shifted like someone had opened a window in a sealed room. One buzz. Then another. Then another. I heard him mutter something under his breath, push his chair back, and step into the hallway. I heard his voice rise, then drop, then go completely silent. When he came back 2 minutes later, his face was different. The color was gone. The performance was over. He sat down and tried to smile, but it looked like someone had stapled it onto a face that had forgotten how to wear one. I let another 5 minutes pass. Let the silence do its work. Let Vincent sit there with his buzzing phone and his crumbling expression while everyone ate cake and pretended the air in the room hadn't changed. Then I stood up. Calm. No anger. No raised voice. No shaking hands. I looked around the table, made eye contact with every single person sitting there, and I said, before I leave, I want to clear something up, because I think there's been a misunderstanding in this family for a very long time, and I'd like to fix it. Just once. Just tonight. I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and I started scrolling. This house, I said, tapping the screen. The mortgage on this house has been paid by me for the last 3 years. Every single month. $2,800. That's $103,000, Dad. From my account to your bank. Not insurance. Not Vincent. Me. Frank's face went white. Paper white. Like someone had pulled a plug somewhere inside him, and all the color just drained out. Your heart medication, I continued. Your cardiologist visits. That procedure you had last March where they put the stent in and you were in the hospital for 4 days. I paid for all of it. Every single bill. Through my accountant. Quietly. Because I didn't want you to feel like a burden. I just wanted you taken care of. Frank opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His eyes were wet, and he looked at the table like he was hoping it would swallow him. I turned to Vincent. And your business, Vincent. Your 3 biggest contracts over the last 4 years. The ones you brag about at every dinner? The ones you call your biggest wins. I paused. Let it hang. They came from me. I routed them through a third party so you'd never have to feel like your little brother was carrying you. I didn't want to embarrass you. I thought letting you keep your pride was the decent thing to do. Vincent's jaw tightened. He stood up. That's a lie. That's a damn lie, and you know it. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just scrolled to the transaction records. The routing documents. The shell company formation papers. The invoices with timestamps. Everything clean, everything organized, everything undeniable. I turned the phone screen toward the table and let it sit there. Let the numbers talk. Numbers don't have egos. They don't perform. They just tell the truth. Vincent stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. And slowly, like air leaving a tire, he sat back down. Didn't say a word. Natalie, who had been sitting there frozen the entire time, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the table, looked up at Vincent. And in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I told you this would happen. 5 words. That's all she said. 5 words that landed harder than anything I could have ever screamed. Because those 5 words meant she knew. She'd seen the cracks in the foundation long before I kicked it. She'd warned him, probably begged him. And Vincent, in all his arrogance, in all his golden child glory, hadn't listened. Because golden children never listen. They're too busy hearing applause that stopped playing years ago. Diane was crying. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears running down her face while she sat perfectly still. She wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because she finally saw the full picture. One son who carried this family on his back without ever asking for recognition. And another son who stood on top of him and waved at the crowd like he'd climbed there himself. I put my phone away, walked over to Caleb, and picked him up. He wrapped his arms around my neck and pressed his face against my shoulder. I held him close, tight, like he was the only thing in the room that mattered. Because he was. I looked at Frank, my father, the man I'd been quietly saving for 3 years. The man who never once asked me how I was doing, but always had time to watch the game with Vincent. And I said, "You can keep the son who moves chairs. I'm taking mine somewhere he's respected." And I walked out. No slamming doors. No dramatic monologue. No tears. Just a man carrying his son out of a house he paid for, past a table he funded, through a door he kept open for people who never once thought to hold it open for him. The drive home was quiet. Caleb fell asleep in the back seat within 5 minutes, head tilted against the window, mouth slightly open, totally at peace. I kept my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road, and I didn't feel angry. That's the part people don't expect. They expect rage. They expect regret. But I didn't feel either. I felt clear, like someone had wiped a fogged-up mirror, and I could finally see my own reflection without the smudge of everyone else's expectations on it. When I got home, Shelby was waiting in the kitchen. She took one look at my face, set down her coffee, and didn't say a word. She just walked over and hugged me. And I held her for a long time in that quiet kitchen, and when I finally told her everything, every detail, every word, she didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "I'm proud of you." And that meant more than anything anyone at that table had ever said to me. The next few weeks played out exactly how I expected, because I'd already mapped them out. That's what people don't understand about men like me. By the time you see us act, we've already played the whole game in our heads 100 times. Vincent's business began to collapse within 10 days. Without the contracts I'd been routing to him, he lost 60% of his revenue overnight. He scrambled, made calls, drove around the city trying to land new clients. But the truth was, his company had been standing on stilts I'd built, and without them, there was nothing underneath. His business partner saw the writing on the wall and bailed after the second week. 2 of his best crew members quit when their paychecks bounced. By the end of the first month, Vincent was operating with a skeleton crew, missing deadlines, and losing the few real clients he had left. Then the lender got my letter. They launched an internal review. It took them exactly 11 days to find what I'd already found. The inflated numbers, the fake invoices, the fabricated revenue. They froze Vincent's line of credit immediately. Then they escalated it. Vincent hired a lawyer, a cheap one because that's all he could afford at that point, but the documentation was airtight. There was no spinning it. No blaming a bookkeeper. No claiming it was a misunderstanding. It was his signature on the documents. His emails discussing the loan terms. His numbers on the spreadsheets. His credit was destroyed. His name was flagged in the system. No bank in the state would touch him after that. Natalie filed for divorce 6 weeks after the dinner. I can't say I was surprised. She'd been unhappy for years. Anyone who paid attention could see it. The way she'd sit at family events, arms crossed, eyes distant, watching Vincent perform like she was watching a rerun she'd already seen too many times. She never laughed at his jokes anymore. She just waited for them to end. She took Jackson and Lily and moved in with her sister across town. Vincent didn't fight it. He didn't have the money to fight it. He didn't have the money for much of anything anymore. Last I heard, Vincent was working a basic labor job for someone else's contracting company. The man who called himself an entrepreneur was now carrying materials for another man's business. Small apartment on the east side. Shared custody arrangement he could barely afford. The golden child, the favorite son, the one who always had dad's attention and mom's benefit of the doubt, reduced to a man whose phone rings with calls he can't return and bills he can't pay. He tried reaching out to me 3 times. First was a voicemail. His voice was shaky. He said he wanted to talk. Said he was sorry. Said things got out of hand. I listened to it once and deleted it. Second was a long text message, full of excuses wrapped in apologies. I read it. Didn't respond. Third time, he showed up at my office building. I wasn't there that day. My assistant told me. said Vincent stood in the lobby for 20 minutes before leaving. I didn't call him back. Not because I hate him. I don't. Hate requires energy, and I'd rather spend mine on people who earned it. I just have nothing left to say. Some silences say more than any word ever could. And my silence told Vincent everything he needed to hear. Frank called me 2 weeks after the dinner. I expected an apology. What I got was a logistics request. The mortgage payment didn't go through this month, Marcus. Can you look into it? That's Frank. The man doesn't process emotion. He processes function. He doesn't ask how you feel. He asks if the numbers are right. I didn't hang up. I didn't lecture him. I didn't throw the years of silence back in his face. I said, I'll help you, Dad. Directly. No middlemen. No more quiet checks through my accountant. I'll take care of the house. I'll keep handling your medical bills. But that dinner table? I'm done sitting at it. You had 2 sons at that table, Dad. Now you have 1. And I'm choosing to be your son from over here. He was quiet for a long time. So long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, in a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, I didn't know, Marcus. And I said, you didn't want to know, Dad. That's the difference. That conversation changed things between us. Not in some dramatic, movie-style reconciliation kind of way. There was no hug in the rain. No tearful reunion at a park bench. But something shifted. Frank started calling me once a week. Not to ask for things. Just to talk. He'd ask about Caleb. About Shelby. About my latest project. Small conversations. Careful ones. Like a man learning how to talk to his son for the first time at 71 years old. And I let him. Because despite everything, he's my father. And I meant what I said. I'll take care of him. Always. But on my terms now. From a distance that protects my family. From a place where Caleb's chair will never be moved again. I resumed the mortgage payments the following month. Set it up through my accountant again. Same system as before. Quiet. No announcement. No press conference. Because that's who I am. I don't stop being generous because people are ungrateful. I stop being available. There's a difference. And it's a difference that changes everything. Here's the thing about Vincent. He spent his whole life playing a character. The successful brother. The dutiful son. The man who handles things. But characters only survive as long as the stage holds up. And his stage was built entirely out of my wood, my nails, and my money. When I pulled the foundation, the whole performance came crashing down. I didn't ruin Vincent. Vincent was already hollowed out. I just stopped being the thing that kept him standing. A few months later, I was sitting at my own dinner table. Shelby made pot roast. Caleb was beside me, coloring something on a piece of paper between bites. The house was quiet. Warm. Ours. Not a house someone else paid for. Not a house where someone else's name was on the real check. Our house. Our table. Our life. Caleb looked up at me and said, Dad, why did Uncle Vincent take my chair that time? I looked at him. Really looked at him. This little person who didn't ask for any of this. Who just wanted to eat his bread roll in peace at his grandfather's birthday. Who got shoved aside for someone else's kids like he didn't belong. And I said, because he didn't know whose table he was sitting at, buddy. Caleb scrunched his face up like he was trying to solve a math problem in his head. Then he shrugged, said, oh, okay, and went back to coloring. And I sat there watching him, this little boy with his crayons and his breadcrumbs, and his complete trust that his dad would never let anyone move his chair again. And I thought about that dinner. About Frank's white face. About Vincent's buzzing phone. About Natalie's 5 words. About Diane's silent tears. About the door I walked through carrying my son. And about the fact that I never once looked back. And I smiled. Not because I was happy about what happened. Not because there was joy in watching my brother lose everything. But because I was finally free of what almost happened. I almost spent my whole life being the invisible engine behind a family that never once opened the hood to see who was keeping them running. Almost. But then someone moved my son's chair. And everything changed. Vincent wanted a seat at the table. But he forgot one thing. It was my table all along. So if you're out there right now, sitting at someone else's table, quietly paying for the meal while someone else takes the bow, let me tell you something. You don't owe them a scene. You don't owe them a fight. You don't owe them an explanation. You just owe yourself the truth. And the truth is, the people who need you the most are often the last ones to respect you. Not because they're bad people, but because they've gotten so comfortable standing on your shoulders that they forgot they're not standing on solid ground. One day, you'll stop carrying them. And when you do, the fall won't be your fault. It'll be gravity. And gravity doesn't negotiate. If this story hit you somewhere real, if it made you feel something you've been holding inside, then do me a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's a Marcus sitting at someone else's table, paying for everything and saying nothing. Watching his brother take the credit and his father take the silence. And maybe, just maybe, this story is the thing that finally makes him stand up, pick up his son, and walk out that door to sit at his own table. I'll see you in the next one.